The Ready, Set, Grow podcast is sponsored by Ag Expert, software designed for Canadian agriculture. Visit them today at agexpert.ca.
Welcome to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast, where we like to showcase startup and early stage companies as well as visit with innovators in the agriculture and food industry. Today, we're here with Joe Dales, co-founder at RH Accelerator, and special guest Darren Anderson, CEO at Vive Crop Protection. Darren, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So Darren Anderson, I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders behind Vive Crop Protection. Didn't grow up on a farm, but grew up around agriculture in a small community here in Ontario.
We need the shout out for the small community.
Oh, okay. So Corunna. Near Sarnia.
Perfect.
Sarnia. And I had a lot of family members that were in farming, but my family wasn't. But when I was in high school, moved to the city, and I was a true blue city boy for probably about 10 years. Went to the University of Toronto. Ended up doing my PhD in chemistry. And as part of my PhD, went through some training, some exposure to what it's like starting a business, being an entrepreneur, et cetera, and really convinced ourselves that we had an interesting business idea, which I'm happy to talk about, that has turned into Vive Crop Protection. And that was 15 years ago. Vive turns 15 on March 30th. Since then, I helped co-found the company. After a couple of years, we really started focusing on applications for our technology in agriculture. The business has grown, et cetera. And I've absolutely fallen in love with the industry. I think one of the most awesome and incredible things about agriculture is how much of a need and a desire there is for technology to help improve productivity, efficiency, sustainability. And I love bringing new innovative technologies to audiences that want them. So it's been an awesome part of the industry to be part of, and I've been really excited to be building Vive.
Yeah, it's exciting. We're going to talk a little bit about Vive. I think we first met at the Farm Progress Show. It was probably in Boone, Iowa.
It was.
It was one of the first times you guys had taken a booth and were promoting the company, and we're in the same tent. And I'd read about Vive, I think, because you had some great board members and the farms.com booth was across the aisle or down the row a little bit. And we had the pleasure to meet you. So we saw when you were getting started with your marketing into the US market. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Vive, what products you offer currently, a little bit about your organization and the growth, and some of the background there for people that aren't familiar with the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with we're a pesticide company working on both traditional chemical pesticides that would be used in conventional production, but we also have some activities that we've been doing in the area of biologicals that I'll talk about in a minute. But our belief is that there's a need for precision application of pesticides. And there's a ton of people that are working on the data and analytics piece. So, giving a grower a prescription, hey, on your farm, you should be applying these products on these parts of your farm, or, monitoring when you're planting to look at what soil conditions are, that kind of thing. There's all sorts of technology that's going into equipment. So what, precision application equipment, new like drone sprayers, all that kind of thing. But there's almost no innovation going into precision technology being built into the jug of a crop protection product that a grower would buy. And that's really what we're all about. It's about building technology into the jug that is a precision chemistry technology that helps precisely control how the active ingredient in that jug behaves when a grower's using it, in order to help it be more effective, easier to use, be able to be applied in a new way that might be agronomically more effective, creating value for that grower and creating some innovation, primarily based off developing newer versions of products that they've already known and used for years and trust and have a real track record in this industry.
So specifically, you've got some really interesting technology. You're applying it to some AI, some active ingredients, and almost turning them into new products. Pumping up their performance. Helping with compatibility with fertilizers. So, why don't you talk a little bit about that and some of the major crops that you're involved in, and some of the major actives that you're seeing this transformation with.
Sure, absolutely. So if we think about how a pesticide needs to work in order to be as effective and precise as possible, what you really care about are making sure that it's really, really stable when it's being stored in the jug, that it can mix with other products in the tank, that it sticks well to a leaf if it's foliarly applied and gets absorbed quickly into the leaf, and that if it's being soil applied, that it's getting to where the pests are, or weed seeds or whatever it is that you're trying to target. And that's what our business is about. We can improve things in all of those areas. Our existing products that we have on the market today are really built around better mixing in the tank, primarily in order to be able to be co-applied with liquid fertilizers. And that's actually a really difficult scientific challenge, because if you want to mix a traditional pesticide with a liquid fertilizer, the problem you run into is these fertilizers are incredibly salty, so 10 times saltier than the ocean. And so if you put something into that fertilizer, it sucks all the water out of it. It's just like how your mouth gets super parched if you eat something really, really salty. And that causes everything in that product to just fall apart in the tank. And so you get this cottage cheese, and you can't apply those products together. In our case, we've used our Allospurus delivery system, which is what we call our proprietary technology, to make products that can mix easily and quickly with virtually any liquid fertilizer that's on the market. So that anytime a grower is applying a liquid fertilizer, they can now apply one of our pesticides at the same time. And in a lot of cases, that creates some real advantages in terms of convenience, or it being the best agronomic timing, or those types of things. So that's really we've got 5 products on the market now that are all designed to be able to mix with fertilizer, 2 fungicides, 2 insecticides, and a nematicide. And our key crops are sugar beets, potatoes, corn, soybeans, dry beans, and alfalfa. And in all of those cases, these products are designed to be applied with a fertilizer, either, for instance, in furrow at planting, or in a foliar application where a grower might be doing like a foliar feed through a pivot. And there are some advantages to being able to apply, for instance, a fungicide at the same time.
So how would farmers go about accessing your product? Local retailers, what's been your go-to-market strategy there?
Yeah, we're currently selling commercially in the U.S. We don't have any commercial activities in Canada yet. We will be launching here in Canada over the next year or so, but right now U.S. only. And we do have distribution set up across the U.S., and it is traditional ag retail. So if you go into your ag retailer and you tell them that you're interested in these products, they should be able to get them. We do have contact information for all of our sales representatives on our website, www.vivecrop.com. So if you're having trouble accessing it through your local retailer, just give your local rep a call, and they can direct traffic either to a retailer that's already got it in stock, or ensure that your retailer can carry it.
And what are the main products again, just so people know by name? What are the Vive products they should be coming and asking at their retailer for?
Yeah, so the first one is Asteroid FC 3.3. So that's azoxystrobin that's designed to be able to be mixed with fertilizer, and that's primarily for rhizoctonia control. We have Xyler FC, which is based on metalaxyl, basically in Ridamil, and that is for Pythium phytophthora control. So those are both fungicides. We have Bifender FC, which is bifenthrin, the same active ingredient that's in Capture LFR. And that is for cord rootworm control primarily. We have Midac FC, so that's imidacloprid. and that is a systemic insecticide. So it's one of the neonicotinoids that can be used in furrow. And then our last product is Averland FC, which is primarily being used as a nematicide, although it does have some insecticide properties as well. And that's based on abamectin.
You've been in the crop protection space for, I think you said 15 years now. Can you just talk to some of the trends and changes that you've seen in that space over the time?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different things that I think are really interesting that are going on. One is you're starting to see more and more attention being paid by buying groups to sustainability. And so you're seeing these secondary standards where Costco or Walmart or Whole Foods will say, hey, if we're going to buy a commodity, that commodity needs to be grown with a set of growing practices that are maybe different than what's EPA approves or that type of thing. And you're seeing a lot of early stage growth companies that are coming out and they're saying, hey, we can really help with this sustainability issue that the industry is facing and really help improve the sustainability of agriculture. My personal view is, first of all, agriculture has always been focused on sustainability. Growers, they care a lot about the land that they're handing down to their kids or their grandkids, right? And so, I think a lot of that, there's certainly some interesting debates that we could have around public perception versus reality, but it doesn't change the fact that these buying groups are making some of these decisions, and those decisions do have an impact on the decisions that a grower would need to make. One of the challenges, though, that I see is a lot of these early stage companies that are really coming out and they're saying sustainability is the most important thing, and we have a more sustainable product for you, and this will help improve your sustainability. But they're, in some cases, not necessarily as focused on the performance, like what's in it for a grower that has a bottom line that they're paying attention to. And so one of the things I'm passionate about is ensuring that we're thinking performance first, sustainability second. Our products are more targeted. They are more agronomically efficient. They do allow for reduced water use, reduced fuel use, reduced trips over the field. There is a sustainability advantage associated with what we're doing, but we're really focused on what is the performance advantage to a grower? How does it make a grower's life easier? How does it put more money in their pocket? How does it make a difference for them? And I think in order for some of these sustainability technologies to really be adopted, that's going to be a really critical component that needs to be thought through for a lot of these companies. And it's something we've been really proud about what we've been doing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Are there any, overall trends in agriculture that you see that will sort of change, the crop protection landscape sort of over the next 5-10 years?
Consolidation is an obvious one. The big guys are all getting bigger. And ultimately that leads to a bit of a one size fits all approach to marketing approaches. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, if you're one of the really big guys, you're not going to get out of bed if there's an opportunity that's a $5 or $10 million opportunity. It just doesn't make sense given how you're set up as an organization. And so I do think that consolidation can limit innovation because it means that, if a grower's, one of our biggest crops is in sugar beets, and that's a market that's 1 million acres in the US. And so it's difficult for anything to be developed uniquely for a sugar beet grower by those big guys, whereas for a company like ours, makes a ton of sense. So I think that consolidation is definitely a challenge. The other thing you're seeing with the big guys is more and more of a focus on traits and genetics and biotechnology and those types of things. It used to be that these were all chemical companies first and, genetics or seed companies second. And now I would say that that's almost completely inverted. The chemical piece of their business is really there to support their other activities, just because of where the profitability is, but also because, it takes, I think it's over $300 million in over 10 years to bring a new chemical to market. Like, it doesn't make sense for them to make those investments. It makes more sense for them to be making investments in traits or genetics or those types of things. So it's a very natural evolution of how those businesses are changing.
Darren, just, we've got a lot of people interested in leadership, small business leadership, entrepreneurialism. What lessons have you learned over the last few years that you can share with other young business people and people that are interested in starting their own businesses?
So I've got two that I'd like to share that are a little bit related and maybe a little contrarian compared to what some of your other panelists have said or guests have said. The first is, like I said, this might be a little contrary, but don't hold yourself up necessarily to what you're seeing from your competitors or other startups in the market. I think one of the things that is incredibly damaging to the entrepreneurship ecosystem is this idea that every company is always going up and to the right all the time, right? And that you don't have hiccups and you don't have setbacks. And you look at your competitors, and your competitors have just raised a Series B at a great valuation. Honestly, there's like a 50% chance that that was a recap. You don't know what's going on inside of other companies. It is a challenging thing to build a business. Nothing always goes up and to the right, and so you can't hold yourself to that standard. You control what you can control, do the best that you can, and that's how you will be the most successful. And something related to that, I remember there was a period a few years ago where we had some challenges that we were trying to work through. And my wife said to me, Darren, you need to have less of your ego tied up in the success of Vive. And I remember thinking about that. And at the time I was working with a coach, I remember talking to the coach about it. And I realized that she was right. As entrepreneurs, the business you start, it's your baby, right? And you want to see it be successful, just like we want to see our kids be successful or other folks in our family be successful, right? It's almost like it's part of you. But ultimately, you can only control what you can control. And if at the end of the day, you're looking at it and you're saying, I did everything that I could have done. I worked as hard as I could have done. I made the decisions that I thought were best at the time. Then you got to have some equanimity around the outcome. And it doesn't mean that you don't work hard, because you do, because you need to be confident that you did everything that you could. But ultimately, luck has a lot to do with how companies succeed or fail. And I think that that's another really damaging myth. You see these entrepreneurs that go up and say, I built this huge company because I made all of these right decisions. And I think every single time there should be a disclaimer that says, and they got lucky. Because luck, if you're a growth company, you're going to have at least 3 or 4, probably more like 8 or 10 near-death experiences as a company. And if you load the dice every time to make sure you don't roll snake eyes, you roll those dice 8, 10, 6 times, there's still a really good chance that you're going to roll snake eyes despite all of the work that you do. So you have to be aware of the fact that luck plays a huge component in your success. And that also helps you, again, not tie as much as your ego into it, because we can't control that piece of our success.
Those really aren't contrarian views, because I think when you talk to other founders, they know how hard it is, and they know the pain and suffering that typically founders, CEOs, it's kind of a lonely walk, right? And you have a lot of responsibility. And you're right, right place, right time is hard to find. And we've all had those near-death experiences where you probably shouldn't have survived. But as I tell, a lot of founders, great companies are born in the blast furnace, right? And it's not clean, it's not easy, and it's as long as you can look yourself in the eye and say, I did the best I could. You have to live with that, and the results are the results. The one thing I like about you is you have, though, tried to employ some interesting techniques to improve your luck. So talk about things like Rockefeller habits, and how some of those are great ideas that have helped hopefully improve your whole organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to go back to the contrarian idea, I totally agree that I think if you ask most entrepreneurs, they would agree with the vast majority of what I just said. Mm-hmm. But we're not comfortable talking about it. We're not comfortable, acknowledging that.
No war stories.
No war, not until after it's all done. right?
Sure, it was easy.
Yeah. So I think that I think that it's important for folks to be willing to show a little bit of vulnerability in these kinds of situations. So. But yeah, so as far as loading the dice and giving ourselves the best chance of success and the best chance of being in the right place in the right time, one of the things that I think is really important. So there's a ton of coaching and tools that are available for how do you get a business off the ground. I've got an idea. How do I start a business? How do I raise a seed round? How do I incorporate? How do I build a board? Like there's a huge infrastructure around how do you get from startup to $1 million in revenue. There's very little available to help a founder think about, okay, I've built a business. It's now got some revenue. I've got a market access. Now, how do I scale that? And how do I get from $1 million to $10 million? And how do I get from $10 million to $100 million? That training doesn't really exist. There's been a couple of things that we've done that have been really important to thinking through that element. The first was we participated in a program that's offered through the Lazaridis Institute, their Lazaridis Scale Up program, which is highly recommended for any of your listeners that are in that $1 to $10 million range and trying to understand how to scale the business. It was transformative for us. And the reason it was transformative is because going into that process, myself and the other founders, we would jokingly say that it felt like the organization was held together by chicken wire and duct tape because everything was breaking. We knew that there was things that we needed to fix, but we didn't have the tools to know how to fix them. And we weren't necessarily at a point where we were going to hire in, a COO that had scaled a business a long way or anything like that. So we had to figure it out on our own. And this Lazaridis Scale Up program really helped give us exposure to the tools that you need to be thinking about. Now, how do you think about, setting objectives? How do you think about incentive plans for a sales team? How do you think about, customer success? How do you think about marketing? All of those, how do you think about HR, culture building, et cetera? All those things that are critical. So that program was awesome. We're also currently participating Mars, which is I'll call it an accelerator. I don't know if they would love that language, but an accelerator based here in Toronto has a program for companies that are at $10 million to try to get them to $100 million. It's called their Momentum program. And that's a lot of mentorship and coaching and people you can draw on when you're saying, hey, I'm beating my head against the wall about this issue. What do I do? So that's also been really useful to us. One of the things we did internally coming out of those two programs is we implemented the Rockefeller Habits, which you alluded to there, Joe. And this is, there's the Rockefeller Habits, which is based in a book by Vern Harnish called Scaling Up. There's also the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is a little bit of an easier way of applying some of those concepts for earlier stage companies. But in both cases, one of the key things that they say is, focus, figure out what you're trying, everybody thinks, all right, what is the company going to look like in 5 years or 10 years? You can't plan for a 5-year time horizon or a 10-year time horizon. And so their guidance is, figure out what the summit of your company's Mount Everest is, what you're aiming towards. Keep that in mind, and then focus on what you're going to accomplish over the next year. And if you accomplish those things over the next year, then you will be able to make progress towards your Mount Everest. And it's all about incremental change, because we always underestimate what we can, or overestimate what we can do in a short period of time and underestimate what we can do in a long period of time. But if you're getting three really important objectives done in every department every quarter, then every year you're making 12 big strides towards that objective. And so you just build on it and just start building that flywheel of execution and keeping focused on what are the main things of this quarter. And that's also a really useful tool to have alignment across the organization so that everyone at the organization knows, okay, this piece that I'm working on ties directly into the company's goals this quarter or my department's goals this quarter, which supports the company. So that's been really useful for us just around driving focus and ensuring that we're really saying, I use the main things, like keep the main thing, and keep the main things, the main things. I think that was a Phil Jackson quote, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yeah, those are some great tools and points. Before we head out, is there anything you'd want to share with our listeners?
The only thing that I'll mention that I didn't talk much about earlier as far as Vive is, I talked a lot about what we've been doing with more traditional chemical pesticides. But we're also starting to really unlock the potential of some of the biologicals that are starting to come to market. And for our grower audiences or for anybody from an agribusiness or investor issue, one of the biggest issues with a lot of these biological products is so that's where you're using like a microbe or a plant extract or a fungal spore to stimulate the plant or help control a weed or a pest or whatever. One of the big challenges is keeping that microbe alive long enough for it to do its job, or keeping it stable long enough for it to do its job. And we've developed some technology that helps improve the stability of those materials so that, if a grower buys it, they know that if they're going to go out and apply it in 3 months or 6 months, it's going to be effective. And then what we've been doing is we've been combining those with our conventional chemical products so that, again, a grower knows that when they're buying one of our combination products, they get the benefit of the traditional chemical that they've used for years and they know and trust. And then they get the benefit of the biological, whether it's a plant stimulant property or drought tolerance or a second mode of action for disease control. So we're really excited about that. We think we're really unique in that we're providing innovation on both the conventional chemicals and the biologicals side. And we're going to be having our first product coming to market this year. So we expect to receive our EPA registration in the next quarter. And presuming we receive that EPA registration, we expect to start making that product available to growers this year. And the product's going to be called Astronaut FC, and it's a combination of a plant stimulant with our Asteroid FC 3.3 fungicide.
That's exciting. Congrats. Looking forward to a whole new stream of products coming from Vive. How can people get a hold of you, Darren, you personally, and then remind them again on if they're interested in learning more about Vive, where to get information?
Sure. So for me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Darren Anderson from Vive Crop Protection. Relatively easy to look up there. I am on Twitter at Darren J. Anderson. So relatively easy to find there as well. And my DMs are open. And then as far as the company itself, the website's www.vivecrop.com. And we are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all at Vive Crop, so relatively easy to find.
I just want to thank our listeners for tuning into the Ready, Set, Grow podcast today. And thank you again, Darren, for joining us to tell us about Vive Crop Protection.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun.